It's the Friday Roundtable for the Bob McCown podcast. Yours truly, along with John Shannon, featuring John Shannon, starring John Shannon. And it would be the John Shannon podcast if only he could convince me to change the name of the show. It ain't happening. Is that enough for you today, Shannon?
Makes me happy, Bob. It's a Friday. I'm really happy.
That's all I live for, is to make you happy.
I can tell.
We are getting ready for the Stanley Cup Final, and it's an intriguing matchup. It is Dallas and Tampa Bay, and joining us a couple of guys who coached in Dallas, a couple of guys who have won Stanley Cups. Ken Hitchcock is with us. He won the Cup in '99 with Dallas. Marc Crawford is with us, who won a Cup in '96, albeit at Colorado. And lovely to see you two guys. How's everybody doing? Okay?
Doing fine, Bob.
Doing great. Happy to be on.
This is an intriguing, it's been an intriguing playoff, and now as a rather intriguing final. I wonder let's start with Dallas. How surprised are you that they got there? Marc, throw it to you first.
I'm a little bit surprised. I thought at the start of the play-in games, Dallas didn't look very good, and I thought they struggled early. I thought they found a way to get through the Calgary series, and it's just seemed that their game is building and building and building. So they've gotten hot at the right time. But as far as surprised, yeah, I thought that when we started this venture in the West, I didn't think Dallas was the best team, but right now they are.
Hitch, surprised, shocked, not surprised?
Well, they've been building towards this, and they've had some stumbles, but they needed to have a cause, in my opinion, and that's, Marc knows that more than anybody, that you got to find a cause or reason to play, and the goalie gave them the reason to play, and so did Bones. Those two elements have really give them a focus, especially the goalie, and you look at there's a similar path from St. Louis last year. You know, the goaltending changed. They found a reason to play, and they've got that reason, and vice versa, Tampa's got the same situation. You know, they've taken a lot of heat for what's happened in the playoffs the last few years. And the changes they made in their lineup on trading deadline have really had a major impact on their team, and they found a great way to play.
Before we go into a direct scouting report on what Tampa and Dallas have to do to win the Cup, Marc, you were in the bubble. Can you give us a sense? Now, there were a lot more teams when you were in the bubble. Can you give us a sense of what the bubble was really like?
I joke around with us that it was a lot like prison without the extracurricular activity. No, it was really good. The food was great. If you were a hockey junkie like I am, it was terrific because you were around hockey people 24/7. And, you know, you'd walk down to the lobby and you'd talk to general managers or coaches from the other team, players from the other team. There wasn't much else to do besides go to the other games, which was really interesting. I think from a getting to know the league standpoint, it was just terrific. You got to see, you know, on our side, 12 teams, and you got to see them play a number of games, and you really got to get to know them at a different level.
Was it difficult for the players? I mean, because players, particularly if they played at home, could go and escape. They could go and be with their families. They could go out. Was it tougher on the players than it was on coaches who, let's face it, I mean, coaches are at the rinks at 7 a.m. watching video anyway. Players need to get out of that at a certain point.
I think it was definitely probably a little tougher on the players. But, you know, everybody was in the same boat. And I also think the fact that they were all together, the byproduct of it was that players got to know one another at a level probably that hasn't been seen since the early days of hockey, when teams were together all the time. And they stayed together after the practices. They went to eat with each other. They went to have a few beers with each other. That's what was happening in the bubble. Guys were always with their teammates, and consequently, I think they got to know each other really, really well.
I'm more intrigued by your comparative of life in prison. What experiences do you actually have in that regard, Crawford?
The one thing I would say is, this, to me, when you heard about teams meeting each other, this was like the old days of the Saturday game in Toronto or Montreal, and you get on the same train and go to Chicago or Detroit, and you see the team in the dining car.
Yeah. Hitch, your analysis of this Stars team. Every team in the postseason wants to play tight defense. I mean, and maybe even the Edmonton Oilers back in the day wanted to do that in the postseason. I honestly don't remember whether they scored fewer goals in the playoffs or not. But which team, in your opinion, is better at it? Is there one?
Well, I think the misnomer is the word defense, Bob. Playing defense is easy. You never have the puck. Checking is hard. And in the teams that, if you look at the last four teams, they were the four teams that checked the best. And they were willing to dig in and get the puck back, make it uncomfortable for you, take away the middle of the ice, battle at the front of their nets, and win most of the battles in front of most nets. But from the dots to the boards, if you dominate that area, you end up controlling the hockey game. And Dallas does that. Dallas controls the boards. If you saw the Vegas series, Vegas would be in the offensive zone, and you'd see one or two Vegas players and four Dallas players. They swarmed you checking wise. They knocked you out of the box checking wise. And mentally that becomes wearing after a while. It gets discouraging. And I think that's the big change, quite frankly, that Tampa made too, with the addition of all the players that they added during the year. They added checking players that were hard to play against. And at the end of the day, if you want to win, you have to check. And everybody confuses it with defense, but you have to be willing to work to get the puck back, and Dallas has been willing to do that. It started halfway through the Calgary series, and it's continued on since then.
Mark, how do you explain on a team like Tampa? They took a guy like Kevin Shattenkirk, bought out in New York. They took Zach Bogosian halfway through the season from Buffalo. He wasn't happy there. He had been bought out. Luke Schenn off the scrap heap after 5 teams in 7 years. How do you explain that these guys can contribute in that system?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One, the other defenseman that they've got, whether it's Hedman, who's just outstanding, McDonough, Sergachev, and Cernak, those guys are just outstanding. You know, that's as good a top 4 as you're going to find in the NHL. And right now, Hedman is the best defenseman, in my opinion, in the league, especially the way that he's playing right now. So those other guys complement them so well. And it's really nice to see a guy like Luke Schenn come in and play meaningful minutes, play on the penalty kill, block shots. And he's done a really good job finding a little bit of the fountain of youth jumping up on the play. And the same thing for Zach Bogosian. I think, as Ken said earlier, these guys have a purpose now, and you can really see it in Zach Bogosian's play. He's playing, knocking people around. He's finishing every check. You see him up on the forecheck. He's really been very attentive about getting back in position. And they're all playing with such discipline that they really complement one another. And I think Shattenkirk is probably the prime example. He's a great offensive player, moves the puck really well. But even he has lifted his game in the elements of the defensive side to a greater degree, and it's having a real good effect on that entire Tampa team.
With Ken Hitchcock and Marc Crawford on the Friday Roundtable on the podcast. Point has been in and out of this series. I assume he'll play in the final. Stamkos we have not seen, although we did see him on the ice last night for the celebration. Does anybody know what his injury is? Does anybody know if there's any prospect of him playing? Hitch, have you heard anything?
Not really. He came off core surgery. at the end of the year, and he skated for a long time, and that's a significant injury, and there's scar tissue involved with that injury if that's what it is. But you know, he was in the bubble a lot longer than people thought. Like, I think a lot of people were surprised that they saw him in the bubble, because I think they still thought he was either in Tampa or Toronto. So he's been around the guys, and he's been skating for a little bit longer than I think most people realize. But he's the wow factor for me. If he comes back into this series and is anything close to speed, he provides another scoring element that, quite frankly, Tampa's going to need if they expect to score against the way Dallas is playing defensively right now.
Mark, have you heard anything?
No, I haven't heard anything, and you're absolutely right. They do keep it pretty tight to the vest, anything that's happening. I thought it was really interesting when Killorn talked last night and how much praise he gave to Steven and just what he's been doing for the guys around there. And you could really see it. I mean, he's a part of this, even though I'm sure he wants to play in the worst way, but he's still being a part of it, and he's the leader of that club. He's the captain of that club, and I agree with Ken. If he could somehow find his way into the series, boy, that's a huge other weapon that the Tampa Bay Lightning will have.
You know, we saw this happen once before in his career when he actually came back and tried to play in a Game 7 in a series in the playoffs at Tampa. I think it was against Washington, and it wasn't very successful. Do you run the risk of putting him in the lineup? You wonder how much game shape he's in, or is it just a question of this guy is such an X factor? Yeah, if you're the coach and somebody says, you know, Steven's ready to go, both of you would play him, Mark?
Well, to start with, you know, they're playing with 11 forwards most of the time anyways. And on the second side of it, a power play goal is like gold in these playoffs, and it can set off a team to the nth degree. So his ability to line up on that left side as the right shot, boy, that's pretty intriguing. So if he's close, I'm sure he wants to play. If he's close, there would be a possibility for especially Tampa, because they have been going 7 and 11, to add him as the 12th forward and maybe sacrifice having one of those defensemen in there. But again, they're doing well with what they've got right now, and I think the ultimate thing is he's going to have to be healthy enough to risk being able to play and risk being able to get hit and not further damage his career.
I think I know your answer, Ken.
You know, yeah, for me, John, one thing, first of all, emotionally, it can really be a tough go if he's can't finish the hockey game, because you're charged up, your captain's coming back in, one of your top player in the league's coming back in, and then if he sustains an injury or he's kind of, it's edgy whether he can finish the game, emotionally it's really draining for your team, because you got to fight through that. But if he can play and if he can stay in the lineup, regardless of what he does, he opens up space for other people all over the place, because you have to watch him all the time. His offensive anticipation is terrific. A bobbled puck, he's gone, and he doesn't miss. He doesn't miss in zone. He doesn't miss on his shots. He doesn't miss when it's him and the goalie, and that's a huge factor. And it could really open up space that some of the other players need. But you got to know that he's healthy enough that he's going to start and hopefully finish the game.
Mark made an interesting reference here. I mean, you pointedly talked about his importance on the power play for Tampa and the importance of a power play goal, especially in the playoffs, and how it can be the catalyst for what happens in the rest of the night and turn a game around. Is there ever been a situation, and would either of you two guys as coaches ever use a player only on the power play?
Well, Bob, I did that.
Really?
If you look at the series, the last two series in '99 when we won the cup, Brett was hurt, Hull was hurt badly, and we really limited his ice time. But he stayed a minute 30 on all the power plays because he was in locked position. But
No, that's because you couldn't get him off the ice yet. Forget about him. He played a minute 30. You couldn't get him off the ice. You'd be whistling and yelling, and Brett would he couldn't hear you. It's amazing how that happened.
well, but he was really banged up, and we really had to watch how we played him. And as a matter of fact, when he scored the cup-winning goal, he wasn't supposed to be on the ice, but I ran out of bodies, and I made him go back on the ice again. But I think there's times that coaches, you have to be able to do that. You know, if a guy's 75 or 80%, you save him for when it's really on the line.
Well, I'm talking specifically power play, like, you know, a guy whose only role is go out there when they're a man short. The rest of the time, you're glued to the bench. Crawford, would you do that? Have you done it?
I've never done it completely. Like usually the guy will get a number of shifts.
Sure.
Strength, but you know, definitely I've had specialized guys who play on the power play and play, as Ken says, you know, minute 30, they're out there and their job is to have that special skill set that you need, the patience, the deception, the shot, the playmaking and the vision that you need on the power play.
So Ken talked about Brett being hurt in '99. By the time you get to the fourth round, and let's face it, it's kind of 4.5 rounds now because they did play 3 of those both of these teams played round robin games. How many guys on your bench are hurt? How many guys are at 100%? Mark, what do you think? In Colorado, by the time you got to, I mean, you only played Doug McLean. You only had to play in 4 games, so it was pretty easy. But how many guys were banged up?
I would think everybody had something, and usually everybody is pretty beaten up. You know, I think the pace of the games and the fact that there's, you know, they've played a lot of games back to back in this particular playoff series. It reminds me of the days when I was playing and you played the 4 games in 5 nights in that
right.
first round. Those things, just if you got through that, you were lucky. But this has been a particularly grueling playoff. Maybe with the lack of the fans there, emotionally it hasn't been quite as draining, but it's still pretty close. When you're on the bench, it seems like it's as intense as any game that I've ever been involved in.
Hitch, how many guys were hurt in Dallas in '99?
Oh, John, we finished playing on June 19th, and training camp started on September the 12th, and we had 6 players who went from winning the Stanley Cup to rehab to training camp. No fitness programs. I mean, it was just amazing. And you know, we had significant players: Newendijk, Modano, Hull, Zubov, all never were able to train during the summer. They couldn't do it. They were in rehab, and I know a couple of those guys never left Dallas. They were in rehab in Dallas, never left. And then we ended up trying to start the season again. And it almost, as a coach, to be honest with you, it makes you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. When you see what players are willing to do at this time of year, this is why you really admire hockey players. This is why, well, to me, they're special athletes, because what they go through and what they put themselves through to win this cup is just amazing. And I know Mark's seen this too. It at times makes you uncomfortable when you're walking around the trainer's room and there's a lineup there, or they've added extra tables and guys can't tie their skates and they still go out and play. It is amazing what guys go through to try to win this cup.
So there is a back-to-back in this series between games 4 and 5. It goes Friday, Saturday. I guess that's kind of a blessing when you think that it's every second day until games 4 and 5. But by then, I mean, this is just be a war of attrition.
Yeah, I think that's probably a very strong case for that. The back-to-back in the middle of the series, that's really going to be interesting, because you got to think it's going to go at least the 5 games for sure. And so, you know, I echo what Ken says. You know, I watched Dewey Krupp. Dewey Krupp missed the entire season. He got hurt in the very first game as a Colorado Avalanche, tore out his knee, and played 5 games, I think, at the end of the season. And what he had to go through to play in those playoffs. I can remember him just throwing his equipment down after we won. He was so tired of being in it and so tired of the grind that he had to go through. But you get to that final, this is what everybody dreams of. This is what everybody wants. There's so many great, compelling stories coming into this that I think all of these guys will do anything to try and win it. So you're absolutely going to see a very, very compelling series.
You know, no team has played more overtime minutes in the history of the Stanley Cup playoffs than Tampa has this year. How do you measure that in all of this? I mean, one of them was obviously the 5-period game against Columbus. But how much of a toll does that take, Mark?
I think it takes a great toll. You know, it's those overtime games. People they don't make mistakes. Everybody gets above the puck. Everybody's back on the back check. You might have a case where somebody over back checks or over pursues, but the commitment is what impresses me. The commitment of these players, especially in overtime, they are so tuned in to try and do the right thing that it really is. There is very little room there, and the goals that get scored are much like the ones that you saw last night. You saw a very quick move from behind the net, a pass out to the front of the net, and just a very slight miscalculation by the Islander forwards as to who was the third forward back, and bang, it was over. So it is going to be a very interesting series here with just how much commitment each team has.
All right, I got a comment. I've had this stitch in my craw for quite some time, and it's partly because I've been in the business that I've been in for a long time, and partly because I'm a fan and an observer of all sports. But one thing that drives me up the wall is this great secrecy, this cloud of secrecy over injuries, and especially in the National Hockey League. What's Stamkos' problem? Does anybody know really what it is at this point? Probably not. We know something happened, and we know he's not playing. That's about as much as we know about almost everybody. So here's two coaches, two guys that have won Stanley Cups. How important is it to you as a coach that the other guys and the public in general does not know who's hurt and how they're hurt? Hitch, explain.
It's critical.
Why?
I'm telling you right now, if I'm coaching in a playoff series and I know where a guy's hurt or what his ailment is, I'm going right after it. And the players know it, and the players talk about it. The coaches know it. The coaches talk about it. We're not just going out and playing the game. We're targeting people. And to me, winning a playoff series is who can you push out from the opposition? Who can you push out mentally? Who can you push out physically? You go right after that, and you go into attack mode. And you talk about that stuff, and it's really, if you think there's an opportunity to push a key player, whether he's banged up or something's going on, where you can get him out, you do whatever it takes. And that's why you admire players at this level. They'll do whatever it takes to win at this time of year. And coaches are the same thing. When you know a guy's banged up in a certain place, you're attacking that place. And that's just competition. And a lot of it is because this is the way that we grew up in these type of series, whether you're in minor hockey, best of threes, best of fives, 2-game total goals, whatever. But you could push somebody out, you push them out, and you find a way to do it.
All right, so let me give you Crawford, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to this, but let me give you a counter argument that I've never heard explained to me. So the National Football League, which is as violent, as physical a sport as exists, you may argue hockey is more violent in some ways, but football is based on that. Every Thursday, injury report comes out.
Yeah, but for one reason, Bob. For one reason.
I know, gambling.
Gambling.
So what? The point of the matter is that not only do they list the probability, they list the injury. And if you falsify an injury and they catch you, you get like a $2 fine. I mean, I know they're not being serious about it, but they pretend to be serious about it. So how can the National Football League do what they do, and in the NHL, it's the cloak of secrecy? Explain that one, Lucy, if you can. Crawford?
Well, the only thing that I would say is if you know someone on the other team, a really good player, you may adjust your matchup for sure. Like, you know, if a top player for the Dallas Stars is playing at 60% and you know that, you may not sacrifice your best defensive checkers against that guy because you think, okay, maybe a lesser guy can do the job against him. So I think that really is critical as well for all the things that Ken stated. Yeah, it's, you know, our sport is a very physical sport, and especially in the playoffs. Look how many times people finish checks. People finish checks here, and you see the hit totals are so high in the playoffs, and it's because it is a war of attrition, and you want to wear people down. And I think that's the beauty of the game, is that if you're really educated and you watch the game, you see how people are wearing down, and you see that, you know, there might be just that extra second of hesitation to go in and get a puck, or a hesitation to go to the net, and those things make a difference. And I agree with Ken. It's amazing to see what guys are, because you know people like Jamie Benn are hurt right now. Sorelli is hurt right now. You can see it in their skating. You can see it in how they play. But those guys are putting it all on the line, and just to see them come in off the bench and come back from the dressing room, you know that that they are sacrificing. And I think that, again, that's the beauty of the game. If you can take advantage of it, you are, and it really comes out in the matchups.
Well, and I'm, you know, I mean, we're crossing swords a little bit here, because I understand that during the course of the playoffs, and when you're playing this many games over an extended period of time, everybody is hurt, and there's no mandate to reveal nicks, bangs, and everything, because everybody's got them.
During the bubble, there's less of a mandate, because now you don't even it's just unfit to play. I mean, you don't even have to say upper or lower body. It's just unfit to play. Now, that's only going to happen for this tournament, apparently, but it's even less specific now than it is in the regular season.
Yeah, fair enough.
You mean to tell me in football, when the quarterback's listed as a shoulder issue but probable to play, that there isn't a conversation going on? This guy's got a bad shoulder. Let's see if we can get to him early. Or a running back or a wide receiver.
I would do it. So would you. Yeah. I'd talk about it, you know. And I quantified this off the top, Hitch. I said, you know, it's just as an exterior observer, it feels like there's a cloak of secrecy, and I would love to know, you know, in a general sense, what the injury was.
Cloak of secrecy.
All right,
it's more than that. Are you kidding me?
It's complete and utter darkness. Then
for these two guys, it's life or death, or whether you have a job next year at some point too, right? I mean, let's face it. At
the end of the day, who cares what I think? But
listen, like look at the bubble. What's happened? The fans have got to understand how much dialogue goes on between the benches and on the benches, and how much chirping goes on, and that's common. And that's the mental aspect, and then there's the physical aspect. You're doing everything you can from the time the pucks drop to take the other team out of their sync, get them away from their rhythm.
Sure.
And I think the fans have found out first how loud the benches are, how much talk goes on the bench between teammates, and then also flashing towards the opposition. And that's just the edge. You're constantly, as a coach, and Marc knows this, you're constantly looking for an edge. The players are looking for an edge, and the players take this really personally. Like, at this time of year, this is all about winning, not about just playing. This is about winning, And that's what you admire about NHL hockey players, is because for all the right reasons, they play at this time of year and they do whatever they can do to play. And even if they're at 50%, they still want to get in.
I want to get to, we only have a few minutes. We should get to this series and what we expect, because we've dabbled around it from both sides. But it's in many ways, it's very intriguing. Both of you surprised the Dallas Stars got to where they are. A lot of people will watch this series and not be very familiar with this team, even though they've probably seen them through the first 3 playoff rounds. This Tampa Bay team has been a good team for a long time. Expectations have been high. They've stubbed their toe more often than not. They have arguably their best player, their captain and leader, Stamkos, out. What do you make of this, Mark? Does this look like a 7-game series? Does this look like a coin flip to you? Or do you think Tampa's history and quality of performance is enough that they should be favored?
I think that if there is a favorite, it's a very slight favorite. And I think because of the attrition that's happened in these playoffs, Tampa Bay having to go to 6 and how they've got pushed here, and it really looks as though it took a little bit out of them to get through that series that finished last night with the Islanders. I think the extra day rest is really going to help Dallas, but again, it's a very, very close series. I think at the end, it'll probably come down to what usually decides these things. Goaltending and special teams will end up being the difference. Even though there hasn't been a lot of power play goals, I do think that the team that can find a way to be successful on those special teams, whether it's the penalty kill rising to the highest level and thwarting the other power play, or whether it's the power play finding a way, that will be the difference, because I think these teams are very, very evenly matched. They both have excellent defensive cores, and they both have excellent defensive structure. So, I think 5-on-5, it's a pretty even series.
Hitch, I mean, goaltending is always an issue. It's it comes down to more often than not. Is that potentially the fundamental difference here?
Not for me. I think both goalies are going to be great. They've been great all playoffs. That's not going to change. I think what's going to be the difference maker is nobody's been able to control the front of the nets like Dallas has, both nets. And Tampa brought in people defensively and up front to be battlers in the front of nets in both ends of the rink. Whoever controls the front of both nets, I think, is going to have an advantage in this series. And I've always said this, the dots to the boards. Dallas has really controlled the dots to the boards in the last 3 series. And Tampa's going to have to find a way to pull pucks off of boards and get them to the net, because Dallas is outnumbering them everywhere. I think that's where this series is going to be won or lost, in those critical ice games. To me, the one disadvantage Dallas has, I think Fax is a huge part of this Dallas team, and getting him back in the series will make a big difference for Dallas, because he can really knock people out of the box, and he's a really good player, and especially where Tampa's strong, he can really negate that. So him getting back in the series is going to be important. And the other part for me, I think on the power play, I agree with Mark, but to me, it's the power plays get negated because the penalty killer's got such a beat on him, but who's going to score the big goal on the power play when you really need it the most?
How do you manage, this is for both of you, Ken, you first, how do you manage a guy like Victor Hedman if you're Dallas? Because he's not really a defenseman. I was going to joke last night. He's more of a rover. I mean, he's doing anything, anytime, any place. And when you talk from dots to boards, I mean, Victor Hedman's too big to worry about. I mean, he'll just move around himself. So how do you manage Victor Hedman, Ken?
Well, I think it's a lot like the Tampa defense. To me, Tampa was vulnerable in this series against the Islanders when they were extended time in their D zone. and there seem to be big openings. So I think you're not going to physically intimidate them, but I think you've really got to make sure that you don't get beat back up the ice against them. And Hedman's anticipation offensively is incredible, but you know what? So is Heiskanen and Klingberg. They're incredible too. So I think there's both sides of this. Who can you take out of being part of the attacks? Because that's what scares you when you see Klingberg or Heiskanen or Hedman jumping into the play, because they all can finish. And I think there's going to be a battle on both sides, which can control the other team's defensemen from jumping in the play that much.
What about you, Mark? What would you do to Hedman?
Well, with Hedman, he's very difficult to control. He's just so powerful. He's got that long reach. He skates really well. He's up on the play. How many times did we see in the last series him take the puck and take it around, go behind the net with the puck, continue almost in a Denny Savard-like fashion, hanging on to the puck? I think he is the X factor in this series, especially for Tampa Bay. But both teams have great defense. I mean, Alexiak has played very well for Dallas, and Sekaras has played really well for them. So everybody's taking their games to a different level. I think teams being able to change puck sides in the offensive zone, that's going to be a big factor. Anybody can do that successfully and really make these big defensemen, especially on Tampa Bay, have to skate from one side where they're trying to close people off, get to the other side, make them move. I think that's where the openings tend to occur, when you can change puck side in the offensive zone and maybe find a little bit of seam or a little bit of room to make plays. Both teams have very good scoring. Both teams are very committed defensively. And again, you look at teams that win, usually they have a great third line, a great depth of talent.
Sure.
Both these teams have it, but I think right now, the defense is probably going to be the difference. And the team with the best defenseman, I think, is probably the favorite for me. And I think Hedman is the best defenseman of a very good lot right now.
All right. Before we let you go, I'm assuming then, Mr. Crawford, that you would give Tampa the edge in this series, and probably a long one.
I think it's going to be a long one. I think it's a very slight edge. I got to tell you, though, I'm cheering for Dallas because I really love the story of Rick Bowness and him getting that opportunity right now. I mean, I think everybody in the coaching fraternity, not that we don't like John, but this would be such a great story for Rick and the Dallas Stars to win.
Kenny, who are you taking?
Well, I'm with Mark with Bones. This is we're all long-termers, and to see a Bones with a chance like this is pretty emotional for all of us. I think Dallas can win this series. I really do.
We will find out soon enough. Game one goes tomorrow night. Ken Hitchcock, Marc Crawford, great to see you guys. Thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the off season, however long it lasts. That's a question we haven't been able to get answered yet, for sure. Thanks, guys. Great to see you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
That's the podcast.
Fun.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.